Hello everyone! Today we're going to take a look at the very first recorded tournament game of Magnus Carlsen that can be found in the chess-based database. This tournament was held back in the year 2000 in Germany in Bad Wiese. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment below. It really helps the channel grow. Magnus Carlsen has the white pieces, and with his very first move, he plays d4, grabbing the center with his pawn. Black replies with knight f6, preventing white from pushing e4. Magnus continues with c4, expanding in the center, but black immediately challenges it with c5. Here, the most principled continuation is d5, but instead Magnus chooses knight f3, reinforcing the pawn on d4. Black captures on d4, and after knight takes d4, they strike with e5, attacking the knight and claiming more central space. Magnus jumps to knight b5, and if white wants to fight for an advantage in this position, this is the move to play. White is threatening a check with knight d6, which would force black to give up their powerful dark-squared bishop. That's why black strikes back in the center once again with d5, taking space. White captures on d5, and after bishop c5, black develops their bishop and prepares to castle. The knight returns to c3, reinforcing the extra pawn on d5. About this move, Ingves once wrote in his game commentary that he realized the kid was actually pretty well prepared here. Black castles and Magnus plays e3. Then black pushes e4, and now the pawn on d5 has become weak. It stands alone, and white can no longer defend it with another pawn. Magnus plays h3, stopping the bishop from coming out to g4. Black develops with rook e8, supporting their pawn on e4. Then Magnus boldly pushes g4. That's how the young Magnus played, aggressively and with flair. He prevents the bishop from landing on f5. Black replies with rook e5, eyeing white's pawn on d5. Now they want to take back the very pawn they sacrificed at the start. Meanwhile, white is still lagging behind a little in development. White is still struggling a bit with development. Magnus plays bishop c4, reinforcing the pawn on d5. However, a better move would have been knight d2, planning to place the knight on c4, a perfect square for it. Black continues with knight d7, developing normally. Magnus plays queen b3, bringing out his queen and at the same time clinging to the pawn on d5 with all his strength. Black responds with knight e8, preparing to maneuver the knight to the strong blockade square on d6. White develops with knight d2, and black immediately jumps into knight d6, attacking the bishop on c4. The bishop has to retreat, and this shows why Magnus's earlier move wasn't the best. Black has gained a tempo, bringing their knight to an excellent outpost on d6. Magnus retreats with bishop, but black immediately jumps forward with the queen, h4. Now white can't castle short, and more importantly, black is threatening the capture on e3 with the bishop because the pawn on f2 is pinned to the king by the queen. White can't simply take that bishop with the knight. Magnus notices this danger and plays knight c4, both defending his pawn and repositioning the knight to an excellent square. Black exchanges knights on c4, and white recaptures with the queen. Then comes the resourceful queen b5. Black sacrifices the pawn to activate their pieces. After white takes on b5, black immediately strikes with rook b8, attacking the queen. The queen retreats to queen a4, but black calmly develops with knight f6, completely unfazed, and now they are threatening knight g4, targeting the pawn on f2. If, for example, white were to play pawn a3, black would jump in with knight g4. The f2 pawn is hanging, and if white takes the knight, black simply recaptures with the bishop, leaving white's king in serious danger. White's king is now in real danger, and their position is starting to collapse. So Magnus tries queen c6, attacking the bishop on c5, and even threatening queen c7, which would fork both rooks. Black notices the threat and calmly retreats the knight to d7, where it simultaneously defends the rook on b8, the bishop on c5, and the rook on e5. At this moment, Magnus had only 25 minutes left on the clock for the next 20 moves. He then played the inaccurate d6. A much stronger plan would have been a3, preparing b4 to develop pieces on the queen side. But as Inga later commented, Magnus was being slowly squeezed by his more experienced opponent. Eventually, Magnus blundered. He captured on e4 with the knight. And here came the decisive blow. The black light-squared bishop jumped onto the long diagonal, skewering white's queen, knight, and rook all at once. Magnus, having nothing better, captures the knight on d7. After black recaptures on e4, Magnus places his rook on h2. But now black simply takes another pawn on d6, attacking that rook, which is suddenly trapped with no squares to retreat. Magnus tries to go for counterplay with bishop c4, targeting the rook on e6. But black responds with a calm and pragmatic rook d8. If white takes the rook on e6, black would simply capture the queen, so that move is impossible. Carlsen grabs a pawn on a7, but black replies by taking an entire rook on h2. White recaptures the rook on e6, but after the trades, black is simply left with an extra bishop and a completely winning positional edge. White's king is horribly exposed, his queenside pieces are sitting dead, and they cannot protect the monarch. Here Magnus tries queen a6, attacking the pawn on f6. But the experienced FIDE master calmly plays bishop f3, suddenly threatening mate on d1. Capturing on e6 with the queen did not save white, because after the simple move king h8, there would be no defense against the coming mate. If white tried bishop d2, black would reply with bishop g1, hitting yet another weak point in white's position, the f2 square. There is no adequate defense, and mate in 2 would be unavoidable. Instead, Magnus plays bishop d2, blocking the black rook's path. Black calmly captures the pawn on h3. After queen e6 plus king h8, Magnus's queen tries to counterattack, aiming at the rook on d8. And here, black finishes the game with a great move. A move that deserves an exclamation mark. Can you find it? And the final blow comes bishop c7. The bishop not only defends the rook on d8, but also threatens the unstoppable mate with queen h1 mate. Magnus saw no way out and resigned right here. For the stubborn try queen x d8, bishop x d8, bishop c3, giving the king an escape square, black simply gives a check and wins all of white's remaining material. With this defeat, Magnus ended the tournament with finishing just one place below Enver Courts. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment below. It really helps the channel grow and motivates me to bring you even more epic chess stories. And don't miss what's coming next. We've got plenty of legendary games ahead.